Prospects fans come here. It's not Note. Note's changed basically, but it's still come here. And this week we're doing an episode on the series we just launched, me and Lucas. How are you feeling today, Lucas?
Doing well, thanks. Ready to talk about some up and coming guys and sell my book on the Come Here podcast.
Yes, we gotta bring the book along. And it could be a book, the article we did. So people would be forgiven if they didn't read all of it. But I think the topic itself is worth doing audio as well. So we'll try and make it a bit more digestible for people a little bit. But yeah, the basic idea is there's a lot of stuff on HLTV which is about, players in their prime. People care about the top 20 teams. We know this. People care about the retired legends and everything. But there's not that much on the kind of young up-and-comers, apart from 400 kyousuke threads a day. Sorry, kyousuke. I think I have to say kyousuke now. We got told off last time. So try and explain a little bit, because this is your pitch. This is your baby. What is Prospects?
Yeah, so basically, the top 20 has always been kind of like one of the big crowning achievements of HLTV when it comes to kind of recognizing players. But the thing about top 20 is it kind of just takes into account the peak of the players and who's the best year in and year out. Last year at the awards, we also launched the Hall of Fame. There was the first class of the Hall of Famers came in. And then this is kind of just one more step in sort of the recognition of players' careers and their totality. So we have the awards, which takes players who are at their peak and recognizes them. Then we have the Hall of Fame. And so this is kind of going the other direction and taking when players are growing and perhaps not yet, reaching those the achievements, the milestones, the records that will land them on a top 20. So it's kind of just one more rung on the ladder to see a player's career in their totality.
And of course that's just the PR answer. The real answer is it's too hard to do one for the future anymore, because then you have to be right. Well, and what if you're wrong? Instead, we just get 50 names, and it's just way easier this way. That's what I've been seeing.
But we did 5 one for the futures in one, basically, also with the spotlights. Yes. Which this first one, I mean, I think these spotlights were kind of like very obvious by the time that we were writing it and putting it all together. But the goal in the future, I think, is going to be to pick out some more one for the future type players and some younger players that are maybe not as well known, and maybe focus a little bit more on also scouting reports and stuff like that, which I think would be very interesting.
Yes, and just for the people who didn't see it, this is the list for audio listeners. Time to open your phone up again. And yeah, because especially the concept of this is kind of seasonal in theory. So we did a lot of the kind of data work last season, which is what kyousuke is. Kyousuke. I'm going to get that wrong every time. This is actually killing me. So we've got quite a lot of people on here who are already kind of graduates in a way of the Prospect system, just because of what they've done since July when the kind of data was collected. Kyousuke number 1, we had molodoy number 2, PR number 3, jambo 4, and makaze 5. And it's like all of those people, apart from jambo for blame F related reasons, are kind of already at these big events and kind of getting to shine. And that's kind of the point of this, is we're going to give a list of 50 names maybe once a season, and then we get to follow them through the season as they kind of step up or don't step up. Because, like in other sports and everything, like it's really fun to follow the wonder kids, like whether they succeed or fail, it's just as interesting. And I think that's going to be the kind of goal with this, is it doesn't really matter if we get all 50 right in terms of them being good tier 1 players. It's more just getting into that human side of it a bit earlier than we currently are able to.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also always kind of, there are some players that are going to be good enough to make it to the tier 1, and some players that will you'll immediately say, okay, this guy is destined to go up, and he's going to be a top 20 player, and he has the potential to do all of these things, right? But the point of making a list of 50 players, and maybe in the future it'll be more, even, who knows, but the point of that is to kind of try and find the ones that maybe will squeak in that you wouldn't think of, or try and find guys that may not have the mega potential but will still become good players and good make it on good teams, even if they're not star players. And of course, once you start to cast that net, I feel like you're also just going to find guys who will peak and not make it past that, but they will be good when they're young, or players who just for one reason or another don't, keep growing and developing, and at the same time will also probably miss guys who peak later and develop later, and like there's a bunch of circumstances that can happen, right? So as any list, this is not something that we're saying that, this is how it is and these are the 50 guys that are going to be big or whatever. It's just a picture of what youth Counter-Strike looks like right now and where different players are in their development. And part of the highlighting some of those players when we write our reports is going to be to say, hey, this guy's in this situation, this guy's in that situation, this guy has the potential to be, player of the year, this guy has potential to have a Hall of Fame career. Like once we do this more and we have more of a history and more of a track record, we'll be able to see all of these things better, right? And also it's just for discussion, right? Just so people can see it, can come in and say like, oh, you're missing this guy, that guy's great. And then so people can make their own bets, and so people can have their own hunches, and people can play, their own gut feelings. And even for us, when we were putting this together, we said, let's not make it strictly statistical. Let's also be able to curate the list a little bit with, things we've heard about certain players that we like, or, somebody has like a positive report that we've heard from a manager, or, a way for us to put in maybe more in-game leaders, because that's always a challenge. How do you put an in-game leader into a list that's mostly statistical, right? So, yeah, maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about that as well, because since you were putting all the statistics together, and how did you put your sort of gut instinct into that? Because, I can definitely see you sneaking in Gizmi there at number 50.
Well, you have to get someone in. I wanted 360 in here, but unfortunately, there was nothing I could do to get 360 in. And I think he wants to be Irish anyway, so he wouldn't get in. But yeah, I think the list overall, it was kind of, I went in trying to use like top 20 logic basically, and just all the usual top 20 stats, and that kind of, because that's kind of logic we try and use anyway. Like, it's one of the things Peter says is when you open up that big spreadsheet and it's all the best players, he says, like, this is a Uruguayan LAN. The only thing are the things that we can track on this spreadsheet. And I guess for this, it's a bit more of a real trial, because how many of them have you actually watched play? Like, not many. And you are just going off the statistics mostly. I did try and come up with a few new things, like, because obviously the opposition level is so different. You can't just take all the numbers for granted. Also, roles are so fluid for these young players. Like, we'll get into it later, but most young players fit a certain role, and then that kind of develops and changes as you get older. So you can't adjust for role as well as someone who's been playing the same role for 10 years. And like you said, like the local recommendations as well. I think if we had a Dust2 website for everywhere in the world, it would be a lot easier. But I did get to lean on some people for stuff like this. Like Nicky B, he's played about 10 games on HLTV and was like a 1.2 rating. So I messaged someone at Dusty DK, and they were like, yeah, he's like been farming Power League for years. And it's stuff like that where, like he'll come up if you just open a stats page, but you still want to have a bit of scope to add a few more players in. And someone like Mites as well, who's 47 and 48. So I put them right at the end just in case, based off tip-offs, basically.
I also heard about when you mentioned Mines, I went digging a little bit, and I heard great things about him as well, right? Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and it's fun little players like that who are now he's in my DMs changing his lineup every 5 seconds. Like, he is like 15, but he's in the list. He's in the list because he's played really well at these local lands, and I think that's more the fun bit for us, is the new players. And I think, like you said, like, we're going to be able to phase out a lot of these people because the criteria is this, basically. So it's different for under 21s and under 18s. Like, all of these players are under 21, which is, like, I've seen a few people get confused between this and Rookie of the Year, because obviously Rookie of the Year is the big award that we hand out, but that's really more of a tier 1 newcomer award. It's not really a young player of the year. Like, it's a different thing, which is why Nerds won it a few years ago. Whereas this, we did want it to be the proper youngsters. And the reason it looks a bit weird is that it's harder to graduate as an under 18 than as an under 21. So, for example, like 60 mats v a top 20 team, that means you're out. and a few of our top 50 are already passing that benchmark because they've been playing in, tier 1 for the last 3 months. Like, I think kyousuke's nearly about to hit that, and he's barely played for Falcons. He's played like 30 maps for Falcons. And the reason under 18 is higher is basically because I want like the 16 and 17-year-olds to be in the list for longer, because if you have the under 21s at the higher limit, then you have a lot of these kind of people who've had their chance already. So what I wanted it to be was more phasing people out quite quickly when they're 18 to 21, whereas the under 18s, like, those are going to be the big wonder kids everyone's talking about, and I wanted them to be in the list for longer. So that kind of explains this context. But it's hard. It's very hard to come up with criteria. It's the same with Rookie of the Year. It's like Heavy God's like 2 maps off being a top 3 Rookie of the Year this year, but he played 2 extra maps for OG against the top 20 team, so he doesn't qualify. But you've just got to draw a line somewhere. It's a nightmare.
Yeah,
and but you're glad you don't have to do this part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this is one of those jobs that I definitely avoid. But yeah, and that's the thing. So also, what we wanted to do is not only let the younger players have a longer time, but also the reason that we put some kind of generous big event and major thresholds is to give a little bit of a window for players to actually prove that they are prospects that can make it at the tier 1 level, right? And they're not just going to go up and have a cup of coffee and come back down and then be lost forever, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And because you can have a balance, like if we wanted this to be a proper Wonder Kids, like overdrive spreadsheet level scouting report, then you're going to have to dig into FACEIT data. Like, we're still ultimately going to have to use HLTV data, which means you have to play officials, which means we are shopping at a bit of a higher shelf than, someone who's proper grassroots scouting FACEIT games to see who the next big thing is. Like, so it is a bit generous, but I still think this list is very special because there's been so many good prospects from last season. I think normally there's going to be fewer names people are familiar with, and I think that makes it more fun. I don't know if it'll be more fun for the audience, but we'll see.
I think it will be. Because I already saw a lot of people saying like, "Oh, there's big names here that everybody already knows. Like, where are the gems that you really have to dig for?" So I think that even when we will have the lesser names, I think people will enjoy it. But I think it was also kind of fortunate for us to get that like those big names in the first one, so that there could be some debate, especially after, as we were saying, all of the hype around kyousuke for so long before he went to Falcons and all of that. So this first sort of prospects list kind of gets to touch on that and then launches off from there. And yeah, I'm excited to see like what it'll look like in the future. If we will also get like a lot of these very obvious guys come through, or if it'll be a little bit more quiet. I think it'll probably have both, and it'll probably fluctuate, right? Like, sometimes it's like in any sport that you look at, some classes are just better. Some draft classes have 2 generational wonder kids that change the game, and others are just weak classes, right? And I think that'll happen as well, and we'll kind of just see that ebb and flow, hopefully, then through this list.
Yes, and I think that's another thing to stress, is that this is like a long-term thing. Like, we want people to be able to look back in 5 years and say, "Oh, do you remember the season 2 2025 list? Like, how many of that list are in the top 20 in 2030?" Like, that's the type of thing that would be really cool if we actually managed it. Obviously, it's not the only goal, but I think it would be cool to have it. But I wanted to dig in a little bit to the list this year, so I did do a little sweaty graph. Obviously, we have to have at least one every episode of this show. Because one of the other things I wanted to do was the Doppelgangers, which I think people always like, which is basically putting a massive spreadsheet into Python, and then it just spits out which player in tier 1 is most like the player I've put in. So kyousuke, no surprises, it's donk. So season 1 kyousuke was closest to donk, but it was not like actually that high a similarity score. And I looked into it, and the reason it's only 73% similarity score is just because donk is so much better at everything. And it's just like he's closest to donk, but that's because these two are not really like anyone else in terms of the output kyousuke was able to do in the first season. And the other thing I wanted to highlight on this chart is just the amount of aggressive riflers. I said, like, under the chart basically is it clusters players based on how similar they are. And how many of our prospects? It's like all but two of the riflers are in basically the same group. Like the lines are drawn based on the percentage of players. But if I was going to manually do it, you would have, like Miltzy and Tomat. I'm not going to try and be Portuguese.
No, actually,
Brazilian.
no, yeah, he's Brazilian. So
He's Brazilian, so I'm not even going to try. Tomachi.
We need Birch here.
Yeah, Bachu and Maka would be good at this segment. But yeah, they're all aggressive. And I think this is interesting. And is it a CS2 thing? Is it just young players are more aggressive? I don't really know what's going on with this bit.
Yeah, I think it's something I wish. So I wish we had historical data, right? What we were just saying about how what we want to do is kind of create a database as well to look back on. When a player makes the top 20 or a Hall of Fame or something, and look back and say like, oh, they're from this time, this is when they were prospects, and this is how they were doing. Imagine if we had this, from years ago, and we could just look back and say like, oh, prospects were a lot more passive, and it was more, is it the game? Is it the age? Like we could answer more of those questions. But yeah, it is crazy just how many of the youngsters on the I think also I wonder actually, do you think it has to do maybe also the style of Counter-Strike they play? Like they're not tier 1 players yet, so it's probably a lot more puggy, a lot more, skill based. Like, when you're a young guy who's really good, you can kind of do whatever you want. You can kind of go crazy on the server. Which is, I think, like once a prospect gets into the tier 1, it's always like, oh, he's learning so much, he has to learn how to do this, like, which can also clip wings. Like we've seen maybe like Virtus Pro with Flamus, it felt maybe a little bit like that, where it was like, oh, everything I was doing before was wrong, and it's like maybe not everything was wrong. I don't know. But maybe that is it. Maybe players are really, really aggressive when they're younger, and then they're kind of reined in when they're older. I don't know. It's something we'd have to. This is a whole other conversation. We'd have to figure out.
It is, but it just reminds me of like one of like the first articles I did, like stat checks that I do quite a lot now, was when Jimmy got promoted to Mouse, and I went full role cell basically, because I was like, Jimmy's playing star positions in NXT. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Why is Jimmy coming in? He's not the right role for JDC. And then you like watch Jimmy in real life like twice, and you're like, it's the most passive player I've ever seen. I can't believe the spots he was playing in NXT. Like, it just made so much sense. So that was a lesson I learned a few years ago, is to not read into academy positions and academy playstyles. Like a lot of these players, like Sway had all the resources in Nabiga, which is when this data is all from. He had all the resources, even though he was playing like Anchor Lurk. Like he was still very aggressive because they were set up to make Sway look good, basically. Like I did an interview with Lear at the major, and she was just like, yeah, like I was like, oh, tell me about Sway, and he just told me about his system instead. And it's like, one, classic in-game leader, but two, like there is a point to that. Like these players are kind of wrapped in cotton wool because you know how much talent they have, and also how little experience and how little game sense they're supposed to have. Obviously, there's going to be a few freaks that don't, but in theory, a lot of the names on this list are not fully developed. So why wouldn't you just make them your nut job entry fraggers? So that's that one. But the big part of the early list was, but maybe because we've just released it a bit late and it's this bit, because I want to get onto the story side, but Molodoy and kyousuke. They're probably the two favorites of Rookie of the Year now as well, even though kyousuke's played so many fewer maps. And this data is from tier 1, because one of the other things we want to do with this is kind of like mid-season check-ins and see how our prospects are doing in the next 6 months, as well as the 6 months that we're selecting them from. So Molodoy got his MVP last week. Well, that'll be on the thumbnail, I'm sure. Proof we were right. We were there before FURIA, sort of. But yeah, what did you make of this, the debate in the comments immediately?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. I think since the article came out a little bit late, and Molodoy had just been playing longer and showing longer what he could do in FURIA, people already had their minds made up. And so they're like, oh, come on, he's obviously the guy who's more developed, or the guy who should be the number one. But if you look at the first season, like halfway through the first season, nobody knew who molodoy was. Like nobody knew who molodoy was. Like it's like you know, like yeah, he did play a couple events with FURIA. Yeah, he was good. Yeah, he proved himself. Now he has an MVP. But of course, none like a lot of this doesn't count. Like anything after the summer obviously doesn't count. So I think people are kind of like, just because we've been a little bit late with kicking everything off in this first season, everybody kind of gets the chance to look back and say, well, like how obvious this is. But at the time, of course, it obviously wasn't, right? Like kyousuke was the number one guy. He was the guy that everybody was talking about nonstop for a long time, right? Like he was like, oh, this guy's gonna be the next donk. Like that's what everybody was saying, right? And I find that funny, like what you were speaking about earlier with the doppelgangers and with the kyousuke and donk, because it reminds me of like, oh, this is the next Messi, and it's like, there's no next Messi. Like that's not gonna, like, you're probably not gonna see that probably in your lifetime, maybe in a long time. Like I don't know, like guys like that don't just like appear one after the other and like make history like immediately.
So you're saying he's Bojan. You're saying Kyosuke's Bojan.
I'm not saying I'm not saying he's Bojan. Maybe he's Lamine, you know what I mean? Like we'll see.
Yeah. Time moves quickly in Esports.
Yeah. But so yeah, and the coming back now to molodoy and kyousuke, like kyousuke was just the guy. Like I feel like he was just the guy, and he had to kind of be number one. For everything he had proven up to the point. Like now, if you look at it now, if we do like a checkup, I would still say it's really a toss up. Like these are both going to be like really good players. These are both going to be like game changing players for their teams. Like kyousuke also is like, Falcons is not doing well, or as well as we should expect them to with the names on the team and everything. But like you watch kyousuke play and it's like, wow, this can't believe that this guy has never played tier 1 before, like he's already so at ease and so, I don't know, in tune and making great impact, right? Which is something that a lot of players go through a sort of phase. Like even we saw like Makaze has started to play well now as well with Navi, but like it took him a couple events. It felt like kyousuke was like one of those guys that you can just drop into the server and he's going to do well no matter what. Maybe it has to do, I don't know, with the style, maybe just how talented he is. Like I'm not really sure, but there's no discussion that he's up there as top or top 2 prospects. And again, we go back to that concept of like the list is just like a conversation starter. Like we kind of put people in approximation and as best as we can, but which one is number 1 or number 2? Like when we gathered the data, I would still have kyousuke as my number 1 guy. With the potential to go further. But now we're going to see, right? Like and it happens as well if you look at any, sports that have drafts, for example, like it's not always like the number 1 guy who becomes the best. Like sometimes it'll be number 3, number 2, number 4, you know what I mean? So there's always a little bit of wiggle room, right? And it's going to depend a lot on a lot of circumstances, the team you go to, the growth you can have, the resources that are at your disposal, and also like the personal growth of the player. Like some players peak earlier, some players peak later. Like we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I think the other thing with the whole conversation on kyousuke, I don't know if it's the hype or what it is, or if it's just anti-Saudi fans basically. But I feel like he's getting so much stick for a guy who's a child getting a 1.2 rating in his first 30 maps in tier 1.
It really is wild. It really is. And especially because before he signed with Falcons, and I'm not a Falcons fan. Like I'm not like, love Nico and all that, but like I'm not going to be here defending them. But at the same time, it's like, how does a guy who everybody is talking about as like, oh, he's going to be the next big thing, he's going to be the next great thing, signs on to a team, a tier 1 team, is playing at big events, is doing really well, and people are like, oh, he's actually a fraud. It's like there's a disconnect here. Like I can't understand why it is. Is it like the hate for the team is making people, talk poorly about him as a player, and that doesn't make sense for me. Like you can talk about his decision to go to Falcons, or you can talk about all of that as much as you want. Is it a place where people should want to go play and whatever. Like that's a whole other discussion. But just as a player on the server, it's you can't say that he was overhyped or bad. Like he's been really really good.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's just like even if you dock off point one rating and you say like, oh, he's farmed group stages, he's farmed lower brackets, like he's still like how many of the other prospects, even the prospects who we're looking at it and we're like, these are the best prospects in the world. How many of them can just turn up to tier one and be amazing? Because I think, I'm looking at it, it's like Sway, he got a lot of stick as well for being Donk's pug friend when he was amazing in Namiga for like a year and a half. I just think there's a lot of negativity. So hopefully this list can be bring people up, not bring people down, but I think maybe I'll keep my hopes down
Yeah, I mean
for that one.
that's the goal as well. Like we want this to also be a celebration, like in the same way that awards are and that Hall of Fames are. Like we want prospects to be a place where people come and cheer on young guys that are making their way in the world, especially being young, because like once you're a graybeard and you've been around for a minute, you can take care of yourself and whatever, and you're used to you're used to the hate and all the online stuff and whatever. Well, with young guys, it's like you want to be cheering on the people who could be the next big stars of the game, or people who could make a difference in the game, or people that we could go and watch in arenas and will give us like a great show. And so yeah, we want this to be kind of like an uplifting and motivational, and you want a player to be like, oh, I'm so excited I got featured in the prospects list, and that can maybe give them that extra motivation, make them keep working and grinding and trying to all these kids are like chasing their dreams, trying one day play on the arenas in front of of the people who are listening to this podcast, who go to CS events and so on. So yeah, definitely that's also kind of like a part of this project in general, is to bring that all together and make it something positive and good. And of course people are going to flame, that's just like baked into Counter-Strike and online culture and whatever, but there is, I think, also more place for a little bit of the good vibes to be there as well.
Yes, in theory. And the other thing is players like Podi, players like Soulfly are in the list. And I saw a few comments about this, so we just wanted to address it quickly. Okay, so these people who people have already written off basically and said, we've seen them for 2 years, they're not that good. But I think it's also important for the prospect list to have players like that, especially Podi, because in the last few months he's actually really turned it around. He's been really good after struggling a lot at the start of the year. And it's like, one, people forget how young these guys are. Like Soulfly has got really good stats compared to the other people who are eligible, even though people are familiar with him from Sangal and things like that. So I think there's always going to be a few people on this list who people who are really into the scene might have already written off, but are still have taken a bit of a step back and are still doing really well. And I think someone like Podi is an example of that. And it's also just, when do you cut people? Like there were a few people we had to keep off the list. I can't even remember some of them, like the ones which hurt me the most. I kind of see if I can find any, but it's just it is difficult. It's because the list of 50, like you say, it's there for conversations. But if you miss that, if I didn't have Podi on this list, would I honestly be able to say that like one of those random AWPers who's 15 years old is a better AWPer than Podi, just because he's not been like the best finished thing ever? It's a hard thing to cook up a list like this.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, the thing is, so this also kind of ties into something that I think about every once in a while, which is like back in the day when there weren't really international teams yet, and I was all like nation Counter-Strike, like you had your French teams and you had your Polish teams and you had your whatever, and it was like a tight group, and it was like they were all the best, and it was like some countries had like 2 teams, and then they would just like switch players back and forth, and it was always the same players. Like every once in a while there would be like a really promising guy, they'd bring him into the team, they would give him the worst roles, nobody would listen to him, he would be completely bullied and go out the window like just as quick as he came. And I'm wondering, like, if there were kind of like better support and development networks and a little bit more understanding of how development works in esports or sports or in life in general, whatever it is, how you bring up like young guys and make them a part of the team. And nowadays you see a lot of these young guys. They're like, oh, we're giving him good positions, like we're giving him his roles, we're giving, and like they'll do that for a young player, which never used to happen. It was like, you are the last guy who got here, you are, whatever, and you will do whatever we tell you, and that is it, and you'll shut up and you'll be happy, or if not, you're out of here. um and I wonder a lot of times, like, how many of those players, if they had better conditions, could have developed into being good players. And I feel like that is also something that, as the game gets more resources and as teams put, like, now we have academy teams and now we have all that kind of stuff, like, as more resources are put into the youth development, will we be able to see players that, kind of grow slower, maybe still reach like good peaks where they can become like really good players? And it's kind of like what you said with Podi as well. It's like, yeah, he started really rough, but he's also like in the past few months like been better. And it's like, maybe it just takes a little bit more time for some players. Maybe like a lot of it is so situational that I feel like it's good to at least have a little bit of a window and not just immediately dismiss somebody just because they go up and down a couple times before they can find their way. And eventually, if they're not good enough, they will phase out like everybody else. And we'll just say, like, this was a guy whose potential was this, and it was being on the prospect list and peaking at, number whatever he peaked. And he was there for 2 or 3 seasons, and then he got phased out, right? And that's also part of the story, and that's also, so what we didn't want to do, I guess, in that sense, is to just kind of like cut the head off immediately, because that can also be the story of that player and the story of that period of time, and so it also tells something, right?
Yes, I do want to get into the human side as well, because I think that's the bit you were able to focus on, and honestly, I think it's more interesting than most of the stuff I do. But before that, we do have to waffle a little bit about the Tableau. And well, let's start with the Tableau. I will just share my screen and try and show it off a little bit, because I think it is something that I wanted to do, mainly because it works in a way to kind of let you explore the stuff I've been exploring in a more interactive way. So the link will be in the description of this if people want to play around with it. We can start at the top 50 page. Ooh. If it works. There we go. Not my finest graphic design, but we're working in something here. But my basic idea is I wanted people to be able to go into this and see more of the stats that kind of decide where players are, basically. So this is the weighted rating, for example, and you can see molodoy 135, kyousuke 137. Like, these two were both doing really well against strong opposition. And we're not going to linger on this for ages. I just wanted to show that you can kind of play around and pick your prospects. So, I don't know, someone like my goat, Nicky B. You can pull up Nicky B and you can see what type of player he is. So here you can see that he's pretty good at clutching, but he doesn't actually play that many late rounds. He's more of an aggressive player who, does a lot of different actions per round, even if he's not going for openers. That's what this is telling you. Then there's trading. You can see he trades more than he gets traded. So he's maybe a bit more of a baity type player in his like 12 maps he's played. So stuff like this. And you can change to an AWPer like Alcaran, who is not very good at damaging because he's an AWPer, because he's more of a passive AWPer, he's good at surviving. So it's this type of thing, and you can explore players and kind of learn more about players. And there's also leaderboards where it's like HLTV, except you just click here and you can just pick a metric. So ADR and wins, mites in all of 8 maps, 133. He's amazing. And then it's kyousuke 119. So it's stuff like this, and then soulfly, who we've been speaking about a bit. So it's left stuff like that. There's quite a lot in here, and it all kind of comes up to a thing. Like, even like nade damage, like, they're all rubbish at grenades, but nettik is quite good for a prospect. And you can explore that in this way as well, which is, as always, got to get a scatter plot in. You can pick your own stats for this. I don't know how many people are actually going to be able to see this, but I want to, we spent time on this. We've got to do it. What about rating v top 5 teams? We've got that in here. Well, jambo.
I feel like
all
this
the 4
is...
maps. What a player.
I feel like this is also going to be something that will maybe be helpful for scouts and for teams, and for, this may be a little bit more of the sort of B2B side. Like the more casual fans may not really want to nerd out over stats of 15-year-olds. somebody will. I know somebody. There's always some people who will.
It's
But like
beach ramps.
maybe it will be. Yeah, exactly. You'll have your nerds out here enjoying this definitely. But it also can be a good tool for people in the industry. You know.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, but enough of the stats. Enough of the stats. We need to get back to the interesting part, and I think that is it's one of the things you said when you were researching this. Is a lot of the content for this is off random Russian podcasts and stuff, and that's part of the goal for this series is obviously to kind of come back to players and get there a bit earlier on the stories. Because I think this is the bit I found really interesting in the article, obviously, because I knew all the stats already. But some of the stories about these players are kind of crazy already. Like I think the one about Molodoy skipping school and everything. Like we can go to Molodoy's tab. It's like he's skipping school. I just want you to tell us more about that story because it blew my mind.
Yeah, so I mean, those are he was even like getting into trouble with his parents and stuff, and like they sold his computer, so he was like going to a LAN cafe to play, and he was like telling his parents that he was going to get tutored. He was like, "I'm going to some tutoring sessions. We're going to like the LAN cafe," and then he was like the favorite of the LAN cafe owner who'd give him like food and free time to play so that he could play there, and like that's the way like he's honed his skills, and like that's the way he made his path, and that's the way he like. Molodoy is from from some like in Kazakh Siberia, right? So it's which sounds tiny, but it's still bigger than like most Western cities or whatever. But he was just kind of like out there and making his own way in like what complicated circumstances and starting in local teams and then playing in starting in his town, then moving like traveling around the country. And then it all kind of sped up, right? And then when Amcal wanted him, he like played one tryout, destroyed everybody, and like management had to call the mom, like, please let him come to Serbia so he can come to boot camp with us. And this is all from I got most of this information from Eric Shulkov, the guy from Cybershock. He does interesting interviews, both him and kyousuke. So I want to give Shulkov a shout out for kind of getting in on those interviews. And as you said, that's something that I hope that we'll do at HLTV more from now on as well, as kind of like with this project going on, just kind of getting in a little bit earlier, like the way I described it the other day. I was having a conversation with Drake because he's going to be at one of the events with a lot of prospects, and so we were kind of talking maybe there's something to be done around there. And I said, imagine you're writing a top 20 piece, and you know how we always have like the little intros in the top 20 piece where we talk a little bit about who the player is, where they come from, like their personal story, right before we dig into all the statistical stuff, like. Yeah, and that's what I'm, I love the game and I love the stats and I love everything, but I love the human side of everything. Like I've always been very interested in sort of like the storytelling and the features and what makes us connect to the players and what I was telling Drake is like, imagine that you were tasked with writing a top 20 article for a player who made the top 20 for the first time, and we don't really know that much about him. Like, what would you ask him, And so the idea is to try and get that from when they're prospects, and so we can already start to build kind of like in our minds like who this person is, where they're from, like what is their story, and then as they keep progressing and as they keep growing, we can kind of like add building blocks on top of that until they get through with their career, and then we can have a full picture of who this person was, where they came from, and how they got, to wherever it is they got, whether it be, like unfulfilled potential, whether it be a Hall of Famer, whether it be just somebody who's like a stalwart for a team, like there's a lot of talk about like Rain, like he's a club legend of FaZe, right? So I think it'd just be great, like how, like it's easy to like, let's say Rain gets changed on FaZe. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I'm just throwing a hypothetical out there. But let's say that does happen. It's like, oh, we'll want to go back and like look at everything that happened. But what I want to do is kind of like put all those building blocks so that when the club legend either gets kicked or even if they just reach a milestone or an achievement, or if like when a player becomes the most like I don't know, has the most maps with a team, right? It's like I want the story of how that has occurred to be there, right?
Yes.
And so yeah, that's a little bit like that's the highlight. And with Molodoy, it's a lot about the zero to hero as well, because his story happened very quickly. Whereas some players, we can kind of see them grow for a little bit longer. Even if we just look at it like the comparison we were making with Kyosuke, right? Because Kyosuke was in Spirit Academy for a little while. Moldoy kind of came out of nowhere, right? And it's like, so how can we explain who this person is that 3 months ago you didn't even know existed? And then with Moldoy as well, there was some nice moments, when, because you have to think about like what was crazy with him is how he, first of all, it's a Kazakh guy who kind of comes out of nowhere. We heard a little bit about the story about like his struggles growing up and becoming a Counter-Strike player, but then it's like he gets signed by Amcol, then immediately he becomes probably the biggest shock transfer ever, maybe. I mean, like FURIA leaving Brazil to get a Kazakh teenage opera that nobody has heard of, and the legendary opera of Brazil, the guy who literally put the whole scene on his back and made Brazil relevant in Counter-Strike, gives up the op for this kid. Like, that is an insane story. That is an incredible story. That is something unprecedented. That is something that you don't see happen. And then on top of that, so that's beautiful. And then you see how Fallen goes out by himself, travels to Serbia to be with this kid in a boot camp, and they just get to like nerd out. Like, imagine being Molodoy and like this legend of the game comes and just like nerds out with you about Counter-Strike and about opping and about whatever for a bunch of days, after you just signed like a crazy contract with FURIA, right? So yeah, all of that is kind of like
still should have picked Gamer Legion. Change my mind. Fallen or Ash? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean,
50-50.
I mean, if we're talking about youth development, Ash is pretty up there. Not gonna lie, but yeah, but yes, and then Kyosuke on the other hand is a little bit more. He's not so much the zero to hero as Molodoy was, as it's more like the next big thing to come. Like as we were talking about earlier, he was like the next donk. He was going to be that, but like once, and again, as I said earlier in the Cybershock interview, which is what I used to do a lot of the research for this piece, he talks about how he quit school, he quit going to school physically and like enrolled online, and then apparently like his mom owned another like empty apartment next to the family house, and like he moved there so he wouldn't have distractions. So he's like studying online, kind of like away from the family and everything, and just focusing on grinding Counter-Strike and on becoming the best. And like there was an interesting anecdote that I found was like, when this was when Kyosuke was still in Spirit Academy. It took between the time that Kyosuke said yes to the interview and when the interview happened, which was last year, he took 6 months and was like, I need to grind because people think I'm overhyped and people don't think I'm good enough. So I don't want to go like and do a public interview until I've really like spent a lot of time playing the game and becoming, good enough to go into the public eye and stuff like that. But yeah, there's, it's a touching interview where he says, like he wants to sort of like make it big so that he can help his mother. Stuff like that. So this is all in sort of Kyosuke's highlight, and yeah, there's some interesting, beautiful stories, and yeah, it's gonna be interesting to watch. It's gonna be interesting to see how it develops too, because I mean, Molodoy seems like kind of like the more kind of like sweet, like friendly guy. Also, like about the Moldoy thing, like how crazy is it that his like first tier 1 event is like in Astana as well, which is like the first big event ever in Kazakhstan, and like the young Kazakh up and comer on a Brazilian team gets to go and play there. Absolutely wild. Whereas Kyosuke, it'll be interesting. He's gone into the Empire, he's in Falcons now, like. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes for him. Is he going to get the love? Like as we were saying earlier, he was already kind of getting what feels like a little bit of pushback. So yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see how these careers develop. I mean, we already have like the running for Rookie of the Year. They're the top two guys on the prospect list, right? And I mean, we already said that Rookie of the Year and prospects aren't the same thing, but there will be some overlap, surely, in some years, and it seems like this year may be one of those.
And I think there's also there's maybe a case to be made that could be a separate award at some point to the tier 1 newcomer, but I don't know. That's something we've got to get Prof past.
Yeah, well, I mean,
no promises.
I've already kind of been talking to him about, this is obviously not something that has been thought out, or I haven't planned it or anything, but I would love to have at some point, if this prospects project keeps prospering and people enjoy it, and it's something that people want, like I think some prospect awards would be pretty cool. And then we could give all the young guys even more motivation to keep playing, and a little bit to go off of as well. Like, and as we were saying, and I'm gonna keep repeating this a lot just because it is how it is. But like as we build those players' careers and legacies, and through the award show and through the Hall of Fame and through whatever, this could also be that. It's like, oh, this is the guy who was named best debut of 2026, or best young player, best most improved youngster, something like that. Just like some interesting awards that could just add to the careers and the whole like lifespan of a Counter-Strike player.
Exactly. But I think there's also a thing with these rookies where, well, not rookies, prospects, slip of the tongue, where we want it to be geographic as well. And in terms of like Counter-Strike's so European now, and all the best data's on the Europeans and everything, it's like if you're an 18-year-old European on like some pug team, you're going to have 20 HLTV maps like a month just from CCT qualifiers or whatever. So it is harder when you're me trying to build a list, and you're like, I want to have some like some Chinese players, some Mongolian players, because clearly the talent's there. Like they're not like Gum and whoever's scouting for Tai Lu aren't just picking players out of nowhere. Like there's clearly a pipeline. It's just harder for us to access sometimes. But we did kind of shoehorn in some picks that were outside of Europe, and nettik is one of them. I know it's a bit hard for you to dig up some gossip, but I do think it's important to have these kind of players from different regions. I mean, we had Lake in there as well. We could have done Lake, although he's quite established already. I think it was fun to get nettik because, although I know why it was hard for you though, because I remember you declined me for like 5 interviews in a row when you played for like Rooster or something. It's ages ago, because I was just like, oh, this guy's got really good stats, I want to speak to him. He's just like, no, like proper prime Zywoo. So yeah, I wanted to just talk a little bit about kind of the geographical aspect of it. There's a lot of Brazilians in the list as well, of course.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. And also, I mean, hopefully once we kind of get the timings of everything a little bit more down, and everything starts taking shape, we'll be able to also get our own source material, right? Like I'll be able to reach out and be like, yo, we're putting on a prospect report. We'd like to talk to you, do a small interview because we'd like to feature you and highlight you. And I'm sure a lot of players will be happy to do that. And also, now when I go work an event, I'll check out what prospects are there and maybe do like a quick little side interview that we can take quotes for later for highlights, or just for podcasts, or for whatever it is that we want to do, and kind of have that as well. So hopefully that's something that'll come later. But yeah, there definitely wasn't much there about nettik. But what was fun about doing nettik was, first of all, I was breaking that, like, we took 4 players who are pretty big and established already as prospects. And nettik is kind of not there, just because of the regional thing, right? It's like you can't really know, and he's going through a whole different system. Like there's only FlyQuest. Like he could have really like for young guys out in Australia and New Zealand and stuff like that, like all they can really do is hope like somehow the best team will have an opening and they'll be able to make it there. And also what is interesting about his story is like he was kind of so incredibly good before, and now he's struggling in FlyQuest. And I think that there's also something to that, you know, and it's like, how do you and I think in a way it also kind of goes back to um some of what I said earlier about like the national teams, where it's like it's harder for national teams to be like the international teams. The international teams seem like very kind of like streamlined. It's like we're not buddies, we're not from the same scene, we didn't grow up playing together. It's like this is the piece we need and we will pluck it and we will put it here. Whereas with logo scenes, you know, there's a lot more things going on. JKS is coming back, you know, and he's kind of like your big dude now. Inns is kind of like he's the in-game leader one day, then he isn't, then he comes back, and so it's harder to fit pieces together, right? And when you look at nettik, for example, like you look at the positions he plays, and they're a little bit all around. It seems like he doesn't. It's not, you can't really pinpoint like he's an aggressive player, he is an opening player, but at the same time, he's like a guy who throws a bunch of utility, and he's like what has a very high like utility score and stuff like that. So it seems like he's doing a lot of stuff. He's like in an atmosphere where I think growth is probably hard, and so he's like slumping right now, you know. But does that mean he's not a good prospect? Does that mean he shouldn't, you know, be in a list like that? I don't think so. And so I think that it was fun to get to highlight him kind of for that reason as well, because it's not, we don't only want to, like, we did like 4 of the 5 best players or whatever, but like hopefully in the future we'll be able to, you know, reach out and get some of the like lesser known players as well, and fit them into our highlights and do stuff like that. So yeah, nettik's situation is definitely different from the others, and I think it's fun to be able to put the lens on somewhere else than what we're kind of like looking at the most.
I think that's an interesting point about the kind of, are the national teams kind of less professional just kind of inherently, because like it's so much easier for player power and cliques to build up over the years in terms of that. Like all of the best like international teams I think of as like coach led projects primarily. And I think when it's like all of these kind of historic national teams, like there's just people who've been there for so long that it's just harder. Like obviously like Aurora, like how good would a Turkish youngster have to be to break into the 5 now? Like we saw Jota step up for Calix, but that took quite a long time of Jota being really good for Sangar before he got the chance. And I think they're getting better than kind of the prime French shuffle years. But I do think there's an aspect of that where nettik is, you know, so like kyousuke comes to Falcons and Nico changes his role, and you're like, what? Like what? And obviously that's a special case, but nettik got all of his aggressive positions, and Vexlight did change a lot of his roles for him, but it's still not quite in terms of the resources. Like just because Inns is more of a passive player than, you know, like than a Snappy or someone. Like if nettik was in a Snappy system playing all the same positions, he'd have a different role, I think. And it's that kind of interesting thing of when you're limited geographically, which is a good podcast, by the way, Geographically Challenged, great podcast. It is a different case for someone like nettik to break in. And also you just like the top teams are so different to anything. Like someone could have a 1.5 rating for Rooster and you still would just not know like at all how good they are. And it's why they've got Regali, is because, you know, are there any Australian authors? No. There's like a guy called Your Wombat who has a great name, but not much else. And it is so difficult for these guys to not just end up being international. Like if I was nettik and lived in New Zealand, would I want to live in Europe instead? No. Have you seen New Zealand? I've seen Lord of the Rings. I'm not leaving. I'll be in FlyQuest playing rubbish roles the rest of my life if I'm him.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, and then that's the thing as well, though. Like, you can never really know until you get the opportunity. In a way, like in Europe, because the tiers are kind of like compressed and everything is so happening so close, you can get a good feel. Like, first of all, a lot of prospects will have played some games against better teams, and they will have played a tier above and a tier below, and there will be some movement. But like in Australia and New Zealand, like, you're kind of so limited. Like the biggest change you have is like going to play in China against some Chinese teams, or go, you know, facing some Mongolian teams, or, you know, playing a little bit here and there. But at the end of the day, like, you can't really know like how not how talented the players, but like maybe where their ceiling is, or how good they could become, or how much they could develop if they got to play constantly against better teams, if they got to, travel to Europe. Like nettik had been to Pro League with Rooster, and he did decently, but like Rooster was a losing team. Like they were never he was never gonna show himself on that stage. He was never gonna be incredible. Like they were losing, most of their games like 0-2 and stuff like that. And so it's not until you get in a fly quest or something like that that you can really say like, oh, this guy was legit or wasn't legit. So that's also something that I think is when it happens, when you have the chance to see like a new young guy coming up, like maybe he will make it, maybe he won't, but you wanna see it, you wanna pay attention, you wanna have your eyes on it just to kind of keep up and say like, oh, all those numbers that he was putting up on Australia and how he's decimating everybody are real, or actually, like he was just really good against that opposition, but he seems to like not be finding his way. And it would be great. Like, like it's sad that nettik wouldn't give you interviews, because I would love to hear from him. What are his thoughts about making that change? Is he comfortable on the team? Does he have, like all the things he wants? Like all of these kind of questions that we're saying, like that we want to know the answers to. Like it would be great to have him come on a podcast and explain it himself. And I think hopefully we'll be able to do that in the future with at least some of these prospects that we have a lot of questions about and that we want to cheer on.
Mm-hmm. And I think I've wanted to do an article on the kind of concept of early bloomers and late bloomers and kind of when different people peak, because I think that's one of the most interesting parts of just sports in general. Is it is so individual. Like everyone's career has a completely different trajectory. Like I can plot the averages and say the best players were all 24 and Peter for years, which I have done. And Peter for years has had a thing about like once you're 28, that's it. So like when Elise and Nico turned 28, they're like, nah, they're done now. And Nico's kind of worse than he was last year.
Well, but times do change. Times do change. Like when Peter was when Peter was his most active, probably that was true, right?
Yes,
like that was probably when everybody was starting to. And but like people have found ways to extend their careers. So I don't know. Maybe it's time to figure that out again. And also, I think like, just kind of like the professionalization of the scene and people switching kind of roles and what they do and becoming mentors to the younger guys as well. Like, there's a lot of different things a player can do to kind of remain relevant a little bit longer, even if they have a drop off.
Yes, and dropping off is something that's allowed for prospects as well. Like I kind of want there to be people in multiple seasons in a row, because I think it's interesting to kind of plot that kind of up and down. So for example, Jambo, who was so good for Passion UA in Shanghai. Like I was in Shanghai. Fear was an amazing guy to talk to about stuff like this as well. And you couldn't ask for more from someone like Jambo at that time. And I think he was so high on our list. I think, where did we put him? He was like fourth.
I think he was fourth. I was third. Pierre was third, and I think he was fourth, right?
Yes. So we put Jambo fourth, and it's basically because every time he'd been tested when we collected the data, he had impressed, had done better against better opposition as he kind of went against them. Like I think I was showing earlier, like 147 against top 5 teams in like 2 maps or whatever. And it's probably like Aurora online, but it's still there. Like he was really good against top 10 and top 20 and top 30 at the time. And I think it's interesting now when you look at someone and kind of their career choices and things like that, because that is so important for a lot of these guys on this list, is basically when you do step up to tier 1, who are you stepping up with? Who's your coach? How likely are they to make majors? How likely are you to be able to get to lands? And someone like Jambo, like you would have gone to Fnatic because Fear was a Fnatic, and they were spending a lot of money. And someone like, look how good Matish now is being with Blame F as a star player. It's like it was a move that made sense. And now you're looking at it, we're like a week away from the major cutoff, and Fnatic might not make it, and he's gone backwards compared to Passion UA. So it's one of these interesting things with prospects is if Jambo was in Gamer Legion instead of Slend and Kersey, how differently would the scene look at him? How much is it about his ability and how much is it about just circumstances when it's so early in someone's career? Or even someone like Grix, right? Grix was quite high on our list. and had about a month before Tobis was like, nope, just game gone. Um, so I think it's an interesting part of youngster careers is because you don't often have like someone like Jambo probably didn't have an agent who told him exactly what to do and was lining up spreadsheets of like, oh, if you join this team, like you're gonna have this percentage chance of making the major. Like someone like I'd just be DMing Messi sort of thing if I was someone trying to make this career choice.
Well,
yeah,
and I think
tell me.
Even then, I think a lot of agents probably don't really think that far ahead, to be honest, as you know, what the real options are and what the better career choices would be, you know. But there's a lot of alliances formed and people who go to the people they know and stuff like that. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
Fuck, it's
but but the thing about Jambo though is like he was the highest transfer ever for Fnatic, so that's something to keep in mind, right? So I don't know, they were, when you look at Fnatic, it's a historic organization. They're throwing you, you know, this kind of thing where it's like you're gonna be our biggest transfer ever. Like I guess it came with promises of like we're building a winning team. We want to build a winning team. Like you don't spend that money if that's not a part of your, you know, pitch, your sales pitch. It's like, look at the money I'm spending for you. I'm going to do it for other players. Fnatic is going to become great again. Like I can't confirm this. It's not said. I haven't had these conversations, but I imagine that these probably were some of the conversations that we had. And you come through Passion UA, a historic organization comes to you, it has a legendary player on the roster. So I can see why you make the jump, you know. And if one thing that I did read about and watch and hear about Jambo is that he's a very level-headed guy. He's like a very you know, he's from Odessa, which is a city that has been heavily affected by the Russians' invasion of Ukraine. You know, he's played through it and he's kind of like made a career despite that situation. So I don't know. I think he probably thought like, yeah, that they're going to put a good team together. They're gonna invest in this squad. They're gonna kind of try and bring Fnatic back to where Fnatic should be, and I'm going to be like one of the centerpieces of this new Fnatic era, right?
For the record, I thought that too. I was so excited at this team. And look how good Mattis is now. Like that, why isn't that team good? And I think it's part of it's probably down to what Snappy has been talking about a lot with the VRS, in that like you just get punished so much for losing to bad teams online, like lower ranked teams online, and the teams that are just like the 3D Max and Gamer Legion who are in the LAN bubble. Like if Fnatic and Nip were on LAN as much as 3D Max and Gamer Legion, like would they then have the experience to be a similar level? And how differently would we think of all their players? Because I just look at that Fnatic team on paper and I have no idea how it was so low ranked for so long.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're not. It's one of those situations where they're not playing the sum of the parts, right? Like the team has the quality to be way better than it is, and I do think that it is one of those situations where teams can so easily get stuck in those lower tiers, and then it just becomes so hard to get out. That nothing is to say that they get hot, or maybe there's one more change that happens and the dynamic changes in the team, or like, you know what I mean? Like there's nothing to tell me that this could not work out, that this could not happen, that like they have talent. Like as you said, like a team with Madison, Jambo and Yambo, like come on, they're eventually gonna figure it out. They have to figure it out, whether it be like with the players surrounding them, whether it be because they somehow get to some more of these VRS lands and get, you know, kind of find the path and find the way in. But I don't know. I wouldn't lose hope. I wouldn't say like this is the end of it. You know, there's still time. Like, and a lot of things that we have to think about with, you know, with the prospects is like that you're gonna have to have patience, because just because of how young a game Counter-Strike is, we're so used to seeing like somebody come in, not work, change, come in, you know, and like there's been this kind of like cycling historically. There's been kind of the cycling of players and so on. But sometimes when you let something stew for a while, it actually ends up working out, you know. And like look at like the Gambit Youngsters project and stuff like that, you know. It's like they had the same core, they were good, they worked together, and like it took them a while to get there, but they got there in the end. And I think once teams kind of like, I mean, a lot of them have already realized it. Like, this is not something new anymore. But like, I feel like maybe fans haven't quite caught on that. Like, sometimes you do need to just give it a minute. Obviously, for Fnatic now, it's been a long time. Like, there's been a lot of mismanagement for a very long time. But it does seem that with the sort of like crown gems that they have now, that there is a possibility and there is a chance that the ship could right itself, and that they could have it figured out. And especially if they keep investing as well and they keep kind of going in that direction. And it's just one of those situations where you kind of have to like wait and see, because in Counter-Strike you can't make things happen like that anymore. Like, you can't do that one thing that's going to magically put you where you were before. Like, we're too, like, the development is too far gone from that, you know?
Yeah. And I think Fnatic and NIP are kind of the two orgs that get loads of leftover stick from how they handled like past teams. But I think the last like year or so, like the way both of them have rebuilt, like I don't know if they could have done much more from a management side. Like the amount of money they've spent, like they're clearly trying. Like, the Fnatic team has tried everything. But yes, don't want to go too far over. So we should talk about our last prospect for this one, which is, if this ever works, is PR. We're going to talk about PR basically, and
That's your boy.
Obviously you have to tell me that I'm biased, because
That's your boy.
if it's an Ash Scout, then it's top of the prospects list. And then they have, it's a similar story, right, with Game Legion, where first half of the season they were so exciting, kind of the resurrection of Rez. Since I am Babylon, he's back, he's having fun again, but also this kind of rock bed of Ash scouting people out of these academy systems and making sure they're as professional as a 17-year-old can be, like PR. So tell me a bit about PR and his journey, because I think these academy kids, they are like, it's such a different story to molodoy. This kind of Central European players having a different journey.
Wait, has the image changed? I think the image hasn't changed.
Yeah, we're on it.
But yeah, so for me, the story for PR was more how he's like, and this is a stupid if, okay, but like if Molodoy and kyousuke didn't exist, he would be the number one guy on our prospect ranking, right? Like, if you took out the two guys, one of them who was like the next star player, the projected next star player, and the other guy who was like the FURIA super scout, like out of nowhere into the spotlight. If these two guys didn't exist, PR would be our top guy. And PR, I think, is maybe not seen as that. Like, people rate him and people are like, oh, he's a good player, but like, I don't think people understand how good he is for how young he is. And the fact that a team like Gamer Legion, which is not stacked with talent, can play so well at big events for what they are, I think PR is like such a massive part of that, if not like the biggest part of that. And he is like a future star sort of prospect, right? He's a future star sort of prospect, and already now he has the skill and the talent to swing games and to be a powerhouse of his own. And so the example I use in the highlight that we did in the article is kind of like how commentators were like, oh yeah, Virtus Pro should beat Gamer Legion any day of the week. And it was like at a time where Virtus Pro wasn't even doing that well. And they did mention like, yeah, PR is going to be important in this if Gamer Legion are to win. It's like, well, no, you shouldn't be saying like PR is going to have to be important. It's like, PR can be the guy who's going to win this for them, and Gamer Legion are as good as Virtus Pro are right now, and PR is playing as well as the Flits and the Fames and the guys who are more established and who are NPR's place, maybe like, if we had a prospect list a couple of years ago, they would have been on it probably, when they were making the way up. Like he's them now, but he's playing at their level already. And so I just feel like he is a guy who people know he's good, and obviously like he's not a nobody that nobody's looking at, but I don't think people kind of understand just how important he is to this game or Legion, and just how much of a part of this team's success he is, and therefore how good he is.
I think it's exactly right. It's a different role as well to a lot of them. Like this isn't someone coming in and being, the kyousuke. I just want to play my pug roles, and I want you to play around me. This is someone who played a lot of aggro roles in the first season, and it's kind of changed a little bit. And now probably Towson's, you'd say, is a support player in the team, but it's kind of the development of a player. I think we're seeing it in real time in a really good team, and I think that's why I do like watching Game Legion games, is because they're kind of picking players out earlier, which makes it more fun because you kind of see things earlier than if you'd waited, because he could have been on NXT for another year or something, and look how well he's already playing in 2025, and it's that kind of brave scouting that I think that's always why I'm gonna like a team like Game Legion, and whether they just flip him for profit at the end of the year, then that's fine. That's you're just doing your job. That's kind of part of this list as well. Is what percentage of players are just ending up on phases. Like even Jacob, who was quite low, it's like, oh, we're feeling a bit stale. Just anyone know an 18-year-old, and away they go. And I think that's nice. It's different to the kind of old scene that you're talking about, the kind of where people were able, like if perhaps they'd bring in a former player like Twist or something instead. That would be terrible, wouldn't it? The kind of recycling. No more recycling. Bring in the young players. Have some fun with it. So yeah, I think it's a good development, and I think we should be bringing this to a close soon. And hopefully people enjoy the kind of Prospect series as a whole. And this is a long-term thing. This is not going to be the last time we do a podcast or do an article on these guys and the new guys coming up. And hopefully in 10 years, this is just as much of a thing as the top 20 and all the rest of it, and Hall of Fame. And that is kind of that one pipeline, because I think that'd be really cool. But have you got any closing words?
Yeah, I'd say maybe we can kind of say kind of what's maybe in the works now, which is maybe like a mid-season, like a little mid-season update with the players from this list. So we could, we have a couple of Molodoy got his first MVP. That's huge, right? We have a lot of these VRS lands. We have CS Asia Championships is actually going to be stacked with prospects. There's like 12 of them or 13 or 14 of them or some crazy number are going to be playing at that event. So I was thinking that maybe after a couple of these events, I think Pro League, there's going to be a few playing in there as well. So I was thinking after that we could do sort of like a little mid-season update on how last season's prospects are doing this season before we do the next big update, which will be at the end of the year, the beginning of next year. That will be so we have season 1 of this year, then we'll have season 2, and then we can do some mid-season updates. Maybe it'll definitely be an article. Maybe we'll throw up another podcast, something like that. We'll have to figure that out. And then other than that, there's a couple things we're working on. One of them is trying to figure out maybe some scouting mechanisms we can use for Counter-Strike players. I think that's a cool little sneak peek we can give, which is like maybe taking from baseball, which has like 5 tools, which is similar to what you did with the attributes. When you go to a player's profile, you can see the attributes, like they're opening, they're clutching, if they're opping. But instead of having it just to know what kind of player is, we would like to use that maybe as like to know their performance and see what areas they excel at, and kind of be able to build a little bit of some scouting around that. So that's something we're working on. And then other than that, I guess just the last thing would be to appeal to the viewers. Anybody who's watching this and wants to give some feedback and has ideas on how to make the prospects project better. What would you like to know about these guys? Is there something that we're missing, regarding the stories, regarding the stats, regarding how we're presenting things. Is there something you want more of, less of? Just this is a new project, and it's kind of like lifting off now, and so any feedback now is great, because there's a lot of chances that we'll be listening and thinking about possibly incorporating.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, well, I'll see you next time.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me on. Come here as well.